Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our first webinar of 2013. Happy New Year to everybody. We are now today presenting making your OnBase usage even more efficient. There are a lot of settings and a lot of configuration things you can use in OnBase that are natively built in to make things a little bit more efficient and saving your users time, your administrators time, and your business time. And that is what we're going to show you today. Today presenting is going to be Jennifer Henquinet, our Senior Solution Support Specialist, and myself, Chris Krause. As with all of our webinars, you, the audience, are going to be muted, so hopefully we won't hear anybody coughing or sneezing and or getting interrupted by your end users coming in to ask you questions. There is a chat box in the GoToMeeting or the GoToWebinar screen that you can use to ask any questions. We encourage you to send those through. And then at the end of our presentation, you'll be presented with a survey. And we do get those surveys at the end of every webinar, and we like hearing your suggestions for future webinars, so please put in your comments and feedback. We love hearing from you. So today we're going to cover a couple of things. The first thing we're going to show you is some shortcuts and how you can reduce the number of clicks that your users experience on a daily basis, so that end user interaction with the system and how you can make that life experience a little bit easier for your end users. Then we're going to go through and cover what is available in some of the global custom settings or the global client settings from within configuration. Those settings oftentimes are overlooked or forgotten because they're set once and never reviewed again. Maybe your business needs change, maybe you didn't even know they existed, or maybe they became available upon an upgrade and were never reviewed. So we're going to go through a lot of those and highlight some of the specific ones that might benefit your business and let you take advantage of today. And then last but not least, we're going to go through some of those user and workstation settings and some of the best practices for how you can help your users with the Thick client, the Unity client, and the web client. So each user interface provides some ways to make things a little bit more efficient that you can set at a user level. So each user can specifically make changes to their system and how they interact with it that best suits their needs. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Jennifer to tell you about some shortcuts within the Thick client.
Thank you, Christopher. Good morning, everyone. We're going to start out with the Thick client. Now, I know a lot of people are getting away from using the Thick client, but there's still a lot of people who are using it. So one of the things that you may not know is that to move across the menus, like say maybe you lose your mouse or something, to move across the menus, if you just press the Alt key, and then you don't need to hold down the Alt key while pressing the letters that are underlined once you press the Alt key. So when you press the Alt key, for example, everything, the letters that will become underlined are the ones that you press to get those menu options. So if you press an A, it would take you to the admin menu, and you press a U, it would take you then to utilities, and if you press an N, it would then take you to document maintenance. So if for some reason, you probably in most cases would use your mouse for these, but if for some reason your mouse is no longer operational and you need to get to something, you can use your keys on your keyboard to get there. This screenshot that is presented here shows you some of the other shortcuts you can use instead of right-clicking. So if you have a document open and you want to know what the keywords on that document are, instead of right-clicking and going to keywords, you could do Control-K. Or if you wanted to add a note, you could do Control-N. So these are another bunch of shortcuts that you can use instead of using your mouse in this when you have documents open. Another bunch of shortcuts that you can use are your F keys. So in the Thick client, if you were to press the F7 key, it actually opens Scan and Index. Within Scan and Index, and I know many of you have probably used this, if you say you have a invoice that has multiple PO numbers that go with that invoice, or sales order numbers, or something of that, in that case, you can press the F6 key and put on multiple vendors, multiple vendor numbers, depending on the situation. So this allows you to add another keyword while indexing. Now this works in scan and index, and this also works if you're doing a file import or re-indexing documents. If you press the F8 key, it will open that import dialog box so you can import documents. So instead of having to do file import, you could just press F8. To open workflow, you can use F9, and then as you can see here, F10, F11, and F12 all do ad hoc tasks depending on how your workflow is set up. There is also, within workstation options, there are more shortcut keys you can set up to do different things within workflow. And when we get to workstation options, I will show you those. And also in the version 12 of the OnBase client, you have the ability to disable this function, the F7, F8, F9 keys. You can enable them or disable them, whether you want people to use them or not use them, which we will talk about more when we get to the global client settings. Customizing your toolbar. So a lot of you may not even know that this exists, but you can actually change what the toolbar looks like for your users. So if you go to Users, Toolbars, Customize Toolbar, here you can see you have a bunch of things on the left-hand side that you could add to your toolbar if you have people that need to do, create lots of forms. Maybe you want to give them a button to create new forms so they don't have to go through the menu options to create new forms. So you can change people's toolbars to make it easier for them to do the stuff that they do every day or, do most of the time when doing their job. And now the Unity client. Now as you can see, the next two slides are going to have lots and lots of shortcut keys on them. So within the Unity client, which more and more people are starting to use now, there is a large number of keys that do a vast number of things. So within the Unity client, for example, on the batch indexing side, you can see Alt-X or Alt-I indexes, Alt-P appends documents, Alt-S scans in this case. So you can use those keys to quickly do something instead of having to click on the buttons. Here is the rest of that list of all the different things and different keys that you can use within Unity. Now you will see Alt-S, save and close. Alt-S can be used in a lot of different places. For example, sometimes we've seen this where you go into configuration and you try to change a user group's privileges. And sometimes the screen is so long that you can't actually see the save button underneath your toolbar. So in that case, Alt-S, will save that screen for you without having to click on the save button because you can't actually see it. With that, I am going to turn this over to Chris, and he is going to tell you some new and interesting things in the global client settings.
Thanks, Jen. That's pretty exciting. I don't even have to take my hands off the keyboard, and I can get anywhere I want to go within OnBase fast and efficiently. I like that. So with that, the global client settings, as the name implies, all the settings we're going to be referring to now apply to all of your OnBase solutions. So if you make setting changes here, this is going to affect everybody. So keep that in mind as we roll through some of these different options. Excuse me. You'll notice of the screenshot, this is what you will see when you come into Global Client Settings, which is available through the OnBase Configuration module, and it's located under the Users menu option. And you'll notice that the first tab we're going to look at here is the Document tab. And the very first option in here says Use JPEG Compressed TIFF as default color image format. Now what does that really mean? that does is if you have a color image stored in OnBase and you want to export that image, then with this option checked, it will compress that image, making it smaller and more usable, saving space and reducing your overall network traffic. And it, of course, provides improved performance for your end users. Now, this option does work for all basic exports. It does not work with attaching it to an email. In that case, it does use LZW to compress it. So just a little tip there. And the one thing you always want to do is you turn this on, do an attachment, take a look, and make sure that by compressing it, that the image quality is preserved. That's the one thing that can obviously degrade over a large file size. Also, you'll notice that there's the Allow Image Markups Without Requiring Revision stamp. So when you have this one set, this option allows you to mark up an image document without using the revision tool to stamp the revision number of the document. So it gives those users the ability to change or update using the image markup utilities without actually creating a full revision, which is kind of nice. And then down the road a little ways, you'll see Use Large Image Memory Conservation Techniques. What does that mean? Well, that option enables the memory conservation so that the OnBase client can open up very large files. Essentially, it improves performance if you have an abundant number of documents that are very large in size. Now, again, you want to try this option and take a look and make sure the image quality is preserved, because obviously through that conversion technique, image quality can degrade a little bit, and if it's too much that you're not having usable images, then you want to make sure that that's unchecked. Another thing that happens is the immediately clean printing temp files. So what happens is if you go through and do any kind of print process, it writes to the local temp directory by default. So OnBase will put it in that temp directory, and then when you exit OnBase, that's when those files get deleted. But if you check this box, it'll immediately get rid of those files. So if you have users that don't like to exit OnBase, or if they sit in that temporary file too long, obviously, or if there's any issues where users never reboot their PCs, which I know there are several out there that have done that, you can have temporary files of printed images stored too long in there that could be a risk of somebody seeing them. So you can have these as soon as the print job is done, it goes through and cleans out those temporary print files from your temp folder. Now, jumping to the Email tab, you'll notice that there are several things you can do within the Email tab, like use the email distribution service for automated email. That's a common one that we see checked because if people have workflow, they're sending out automated emails, and it's using the distribution service to do so. But one of the next features is down on the bottom. You'll notice there's 3 options for naming attachments. So you can have random, which will be that goofy whatever number string attachment that can confuse people. Some people think that you're getting spammed because it's got some random thing and people don't like to click it. Or you can use the auto name string on your document type. And for those of you that remember, you set up your document types and you give it an auto name string, and that's what people see in their hit list when they do a retrieval. And that auto name string sometimes is really long. And sometimes there's too much information in there. You wouldn't actually want to have that be a part of your attachment name. So as an alternative, you can use the print auto name string. And a lot of people don't even know what this is, but we're going to show you a little bit later where you can set that up. But on every document type, you can have a print auto name string that could be much shorter and use that as the email attachment name, which could be much more useful and preserves your end users from going in and changing that changing the file name every time they do an attachment. So saving them time, making it easier, and obviously standardizing what you're sending out is critical from a global deployment. Now from a global level, you can also do some fun things with your keywords. The 2 that we're going to highlight here are the last 2 actually. And that's prevent pasting multiple lines of data into keyword edit fields. So when you select this one, the user is prevented from pasting multiple lines. If they select multiple lines from a text document, an email, or a third-party system, and they say copy, and they're going to paste it into the keyword field. If there are multiple lines, blank lines are ignored, but if they have multiple lines of actual information, if this option is checked, then it will not paste those multiple lines. It will only paste the first portion into the keyword field, which is really kind of handy. Additionally, the next one down, store keyword set data on file import. So, of course, your end user is doing a file import, and if this is checked and they have a keyword that is a data set, when they do the import, it will automatically add that value to that data set. That's very similar to the autofill sets that a lot of people are using these days. So if you have an autofill set and you do an update to it, it can go through and obviously update the autofill table. This is doing it for a data set table. Very nice, very handy. As long as you trust your users that are putting in good data, it's definitely a good idea to turn that on. Now we're going to the Security tab, and there's a couple of things here that we're going to highlight that are fairly new that will definitely help improve the overall security of your system and hopefully improve your end user experience. So the first one we're going to highlight is the document modify right does not imply the right to delete document pages, which is the third one down. Simply by checking that box, you can deny users with the modified privilege the right to delete pages from a document. Now, if a user has both modify and delete, they still have the ability to delete documents and pages from those documents. So that is a handy little thing. If you want to have people still have modified, maybe they want to be able to do some image markup, but you don't want to have them delete anything out, so they can modify it, but they can't delete pages. Just simply check that box, and they won't have that. The next one down, use file-based repository for workstation registration settings. If your workstations are locked down and you don't want users modifying or updating the registry, and and you want to have the users be able to save their configuration setting changes, when you enable this, it basically moves everything out of the registry and puts it into an app settings INI file in the Windows directory. And then everything that they change is saved at that location. So with that enabled, changes to OnBase are saved there rather than in the registry. Kind of nice. The next tab is platter management. And I know everybody's being really good about doing their platter management because it's the first of the year. So everyone's gone back through and done their New Year's resolutions, and platter management was on that list. I just know it. A couple of these checkboxes are handy for easing your admin burdens. And the first checkbox, automatically analyze all backups, will just perform those checks automatically, so you don't even have to worry about just checking. When you go through the platter management process, it'll ask you, do you want to do an analyze? By checking this box, it won't even ask you that. It'll just automatically do it, which is really nice. And then the third one down, the reverse sort platter management window volumes. So this just reverses the order in which that you're seeing them, so that the highest volume number to the lowest volume number is done. And it creates a button that allows you to resort. So it's kind of like a custom query in the fact that you can get those results and then you control in what sequence that you see them, which is kind of nice. Again, easing your admin burden. And then last but not least, the last one is enable generation of deleted file reports for third-party backup systems. So for those of you that have a third-party backup system that you're leveraging to do all of your platter management, by checking this box, when it goes through and deletes disk group files, a report is put into OnBase that you can pull up the system configuration reports. So automatically does that for you. You don't have to do anything more with it, which is nice. And now we're going to jump to the last tab, and the last tab is the miscellaneous tab. Excuse me. The first option on this screen, you'll see the display real name instead of username. So of course, within every user configuration, you have the username and then you have their real name. So this just obviously switches between those two, assuming that you have the real name filled in. The next option down, use Internet Explorer default printer. So for those web client users, if you're in IE, of course, and you're sitting in OnBase, by default it's automatically going to grab the default printer used by IE on that workstation. So obviously that takes away all the pain and sorrow for that, because every system should have a printer already configured, and by default, this should be one associated with IE. The next one down, archive configuration activity as sysconfiguration report. This is really nice if you have multiple administrators, and everybody should have one, because even if you're a primary, you probably have a backup. If that backup makes changes, you really want to know about those changes, and you want them documented. When were those changes done? By simply checking that box, every time you go into config, it'll generate a report of what was changed, and then it saves that to the sysconfiguration reports document type. So then you can pull them back up later on for reference. So I highly recommend you enable that just for backup and obviously documentation purposes. And then jumping down right above the custom splash screen, you have the enable F7, F12 accelerator keystrokes. This is what Jen was referring to. This is how your end users can just jump into the various spots within OnBase simply by hitting an F key. How cool is that? All you have to do is check that box and save it, and that setting becomes enabled, and your end users can jump between the different screens automatically through the F keys. So that's it for global client settings. Now there's a couple of configuration settings that you can make that will make life a little bit easier for your end users, well, and for you. And the first one is the attachment settings. So when you're sending an email, if you have an attachment, you can click on the box to say disable any kind of warning attachment. And obviously in the web client, that's using the app server settings. So I know a lot of you have had to change your settings for file size and what's allowed there. This gives you, you can set the threshold that you want to have to warn people when they're attaching something large. And this could be dictated by your email system. Perhaps your email system only allows 4 meg attachments. Then you can set this to say, if it exceeds 4, warn them because it is going to get bounced. Or if your customers have a lot of restrictions based on email size, it's a good idea to set this here so that way your end users aren't sending huge files, and then of course your end customers are getting complaints that they're not getting them, and you have to track why, and it's usually because the file size is too big. And as we referenced before, down below the auto name strings, this is where on the document type, when you go to the View Print Options button in the upper right-hand corner of the document type configuration, you see the screen presented on the bottom of this slide. And you'll notice that the Print Title button in the bottom right-hand corner, that is your print auto name string. So in the global client settings, under the email tab, when we said what do we want to have our attachment name be, this print title under View Print Options is what that's referring to. And that print title button produces exactly the same window as your auto name string. So again, you can put in your keywords, you can use just free text, whatever you want to use as your identifier for those attachment names. So that's where the naming gets a little bit different, the fact that it's under the View Print Options and it's called Print Title, but that is where it's used from the email string that we referenced earlier under Global Client Settings. So in configuration, under the utility menu, there's a couple things that people can leverage that are fairly new and fairly invaluable. And the first one is the version compatibility. This one you can set, and what it does, obviously it lets you set the minimum version for both the OnBase client and the web client that you're going to allow access into the database. This is nice if maybe you've done a rollout of a phased upgrade, so you did it department by department. Once you say you're done, you put in your minimum versions, and anybody using an older version can't access the system. They'll get an error message saying you are using an older version of the client. Please update your client to access to this level, whatever number you put in there. So in this case, hopefully it's 1201. Include the build number, and this will then become the minimum version that everybody has to run, and you'll ensure that everybody's using the correct version. Because with the new versions, obviously becomes additional functionality, and you want to make sure that you have consistency across your organization from using the exact same client, which makes troubleshooting easier. It makes sure that everybody has the same user experience, so on and so forth. So you can, as an admin, lock that down simply by putting those numbers in here. Now, for those of you on 12, you already know that there's something a little bit different about configuration. if you've ever gone into configuration in 12 and then you closed out, you'll notice that all of a sudden you get asked a question. It says, do you want to reset the cache? So by default, it's asking you, and as you know, you make changes in config in order for things like the Unity client or the web client to see them. You have to do, historically, an IIS reset. Well, Highland's built in an automatic function to go out and reset the IIS cache to pick up most of the changes. So under utils, there's a thing called service monitoring. So if you've made some changes in config and you don't want to leave config, you can go to utils service monitoring, click the reset cache button, and that will go out to your IIS and automatically reset the cache for the application server specified in OnBase configuration. And then they also give you the checkbox to say, do you want, do you want to be prompted to reset the cache when you exit configuration? So some people historically have made changes in configuration during the day, and then at night have a scheduled IIS reset to pick up all those changes, and their end users then see them the next day. That's a perfectly great process. You can retain that process, but it can be a little annoying to be asked every single time you leave config, do you want to reset the cache? So you have the option as an admin to turn that on and off. So a great feature, nice new addition to OnBase 12. For those of you not on 12, this is another good reason to get to 12. Additionally, under util workstation registration, there are a couple things in here that we can use to enhance the user experience. So for example, the computer name not unique. So some places don't have unique computer names. When they log in, obviously you can see this in the client when you're assigning workstation registration, that computer name is always listed. If they're not unique, or if you have the checkbox checked, they don't have to be unique. So if they're the same, that's perfectly acceptable. And it also register new workstations as workstation clients. So by default, OnBase always puts everything in as a concurrent client. If the majority of your licensing is workstation client, you can default that, again, easing your administration needs. You can also register new workstations with workflow. So for those of you that have workflow, if all of your users get a workflow client license, by checking that box, by default, the first time they log in, they'll get a concurrent client and a workflow concurrent client license assigned to their workstation. Again, saving you admin overhead when your user says, I can't get into workflow, why? Also, workstation clients can time out. So if you want to make sure that your end users with a workstation client, we all know that the workstation client license means that workstation gets in no matter what. That workstation will always get access to OnBase. But maybe you have a shared workstation license, like a scan station, that's sitting out where multiple people access it. Well, maybe you want those to time out because somebody's went in, scanned, left, but they left the client open. And anybody could walk up and do some work. So in order to ensure that people don't have access who shouldn't, if you have the workstation, this checkbox checked, that workstation will time out before requiring the user to re-authenticate prior to doing any work. And with that, so we've covered a lot. So we've covered some global client settings to affect all of your users, and we've also covered some of the client settings that will make the user experience a little bit easier and make your admin process a little bit easier. And now we're going to go through some user settings, so at the user levels and things that can make life a little bit easier for end users. With that, Ms. Jen.
Well, thank you, Chris. That was a lot of really good information. All right. Within the Thick client, there is options to change settings by user, and there's also options to change settings by the workstation itself. In the case you have multiple users logging into a workstation, you would have to, if you want these changes for each user, you would then have to make these changes while each user is logged in. On here you can see the general tab here gives us what the general screen is going to look like. So it'll display a toolbar, you'll have the status bar at the bottom, you'll have the keyword operators like and or, next to the keywords when you're doing indexing. And then down here, disable document list refresh. Now, if you have somebody doing a highly intensive query that brings back a lot of documents, you might not want this the list to constantly refresh, because it's constantly going out and pinging the database and making that query. So this might, for some users, depending on what they do, might be worth it to have that checked. And then the document list refresh rate, it's set to 100 seconds by default. That might be good. You may want to increase it or decrease it depending on what that user is doing. And then the startup tab. So by default, usually the dialog box is what opens up and is on your screen when you open the Thick client. Now maybe your users actually run a custom query to pull up all their data. So maybe you would want them to start up in the custom query list instead of in the dialog box or into the retrieval dialog, because that's how they do all their searching for documents. Maybe this user strictly uses workflow, so you could have the workflow come up. Or maybe this is your scan station, and all that's done at this box is scan. So you could have the user set up to automatically, when they log in, it goes straight to the scan and index window, and they can start scanning their work for the day. Now the document tab. There's a lot of different settings on here, and depending on what kind of documents you bring in and different things, you may want to set some of these things. One of the options over here on display options is to hide notes. You can have that checked, therefore the note will come up as just an icon, or you could, if you don't have that checked, have the note actually display on the document when it is opened. So that way, if there is a note, you automatically see what information is in that note. Now that may be useful for some people and might not be useful for others. Then there's this down here on the bottom, the display all documents if the number of results is less than or equal to 0. So if somebody is doing a search within a document type and there's only one document, it is going to, by default, open that one document. You can change that if you would like it to come up in a list versus having it open that one document. So that you can change here for those users. All right, in the workflow combined view. Now you may have seen this before and not really sure how it would help you or what you would use it for. So here is kind of an example where if you have a customer or one of your users that actually say they have 3 queues that they monitor daily, what you can do is you can add them to the combined view here, even if they're in different life cycles, and then they would show up in this list when they log into workflow. So then you can see what queue it's in and what the auto name string is for the document. So then, and the time that it came into the queue. So that way the user can see all the documents and then go to the queues that need her attention. And then the default retrieval dates. Now, by default, this is set to none, and the dates will not be have any information in them, and you can choose what dates you like. But if you have a customer or one of your users that is always looking at the current month or the current week or last month's data, it may make sense to have this default to that, a range and or a single date. If they're always looking at yesterday's documents, what was scanned in yesterday, then maybe yesterday would be the appropriate for this user. So this helps them so they don't have to constantly go in there and change the date range or the date every time they come into OnBase, it can be done automatically through here, and then it will change, you know, depending on the date. And now your workstation settings. So these are all set by workstation. So these settings are, if you have a workstation that has multiple people that log into it, these settings will take effect for every user that logs into this workstation. These are the, showing you here the document import options. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of different things, and you may have users that ask you, well, every time I import a document, it gives me the keywords for the last document I imported. Well, here's where you can make those changes. So you can say, clear keywords after import, or clear the document type after import, which, you know, if they are bringing documents in for several different document types, that might be a, you know, a good thing to change. If they're bringing in documents always importing into the same document type, then maybe that's a good one to leave alone, because then they don't have to enter it every time. They enter it the first time, and then it will stay there for them while they continue to go through the documents. The check initiate workflow box. Now this might be something, if these documents are going into workflow and you don't want your users to have to remember to click that box, you can have it always come up, and then it's always there. And here's another one, another workstation option, the workflow display options. Now, there's several different things you can do in here. You can auto-open a queue, so if you have a work queue that this person on this workstation always logs into, you might want to change that to make their life easier so they always come in to that location. You may have seen this if you've been using OnBase for a long time and you went, excuse me, you went from the classic view to the core view. You may have made the change here for the user interface to be core or classic. And then here are those accelerator keys that I was talking about earlier. There is a list here of several options that you can change, like changing, you know, switching within the document window, or switching within the interaction window, or the folder window. So there's a whole list of options under the action here that allows you to, different actions that you can perform. And then if you click the configure button, it will allow you to set up a key, like F1 or F2 or Alt F2 or something of that nature. And then when you're in or workflow and you do that action, it will do whatever action is set up here for you. All right, and now in the web client. So just as the Thick client has user custom settings, so does the web client. So in the web client, you can see you can make the date changes just like we could in the Thick client. So you can change it to yesterday, today, you know, last month, whatever is easier for your user. You can have the rotate auto save, so when they rotate an image thumbnail, it will auto save, so you can set that up by user. This is relatively new to OnBase Web, is the client settings. So this allows you, if users have changed heights of folders or your document lists or folder lists or work folder user interface or any of those folders or any of those windows, you can they can reset those settings here so that if, for instance, they were looking at these documents and now the window is so small they can't see the documents, this will allow them to fix that so they can see the documents. Here's the document import settings, so you have the option to clear the document type and clear all the keywords. like you could in the web or Thick client. And then here's also some work view settings if you are using work view. They also have some briefcase options if you're using the EDM briefcase. You know, check-in documents, synchronize documents, archive new documents. So those are also things you can check to have done right when you log into the system. And then our Unity client. So we have more and more people that are using the Unity client and are now starting to use it as of first of the year and implementing it. So here's some different options and different customizing you could do for the Unity client. So when you open the Unity client, it will bring up a page that gives you, which is considered your home page, and you can customize this either individually or on a global level to add web pages or RSS feeds. So if you want to do this on an individual level, it's very easy. You click on this little, looks like a little gear over here, and it will allow you to add new. So maybe somebody in your accounting group always goes to a website to download vendor invoices or something of that nature. You could put this in there so they could get to those websites. And RSS feeds are very similar. If you would like to do this on a global level, if you go out to our blog, there was actually a blog article written about the file that you change, and once you make the changes in that file, then those changes will be global for everyone. So you can check out our blog to get that information if you're interested in doing something like that. Now, personal pages. This is also something very different with the Unity client. And these are done for your users by user level. And you can add different tiles to your personal page for maybe what your user uses or does for their job. So as you can see here, you can add documents, you can add custom queries, you can add e-forms, you can add workflow queues. So you can add all these different things, DKT or knowledge transfer database articles that need to be read. So you can add all this stuff so that your user just has to click on personal page when they come into the Unity client, and they can get to everything that they do for their work right here. And so that's actually a really nice feature that was added with the Unity client to make a very nice user experience. And just like in the other two clients, there's also options that you can change, user options. So as you can see here, there's a whole bunch of tabs that you can go down. And the first one is general. And so here, when we log out, since this is checked, it's going to say, are you sure you want to exit? So you can take that off if you just want it to exit and you don't want people to have to confirm. Here's the internal, your mail, notify if you get new mail, if you're using the internal mail, and then, a refresh rate to go with that. Here's document options. There again, you can hide notes, you can hide thumbnails, you can auto-save when you flip and rotate a document. You can change the image scale depending on how you want it to be presented. Here's that automatically open if search returns a single result. So here, currently without this checked, you would get the list of that document, but if you check that, you would then get the document to open. So there's a lot of the same settings that you have in your Thick client that are now in the Unity client. So here's your document upload, clear keywords, open document after upload, automatic preview of imported documents. These are all nice features that can enhance your user's experience. Here's the retrieval dates that we've talked about several times. You have all the same options. So last month, yesterday, current week, whatever your customer or your user needs to do their work. And then there's also workflow. So you can have workflow display in a new window. You can allow multiple instances of workflow layout. You can open in the following view if you have any views here. So automatically open the last selected view. So there's options here within workflow that you can change so that your user, when they log into workflow, it is set up to be the best experience for them. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Chris.
Wow, Jen, that was pretty cool. A lot of different ways that users can change their user experience to minimize the number of clicks and to speed along their processing. So we've covered a lot today. Obviously, the different ways you can change from, for example, not having the users click at all by using all the function key shortcuts available in the various clients like Unity and Thick client. And then we went through all the global client settings and all the admin things that can change and update the end user experience and unify the experience for all of your users and hopefully ease some of the admin burdens. And then last, we just went through all the user workstation options that you can leverage to, again, help your end users be more efficient in 2013. So what are some of the things that you should always consider before making any changes? Obviously, you want to take a look at your business needs. You want to make sure that the changes you're making align with what your business needs to do. So will it benefit the entire organization, and how does it impact the organization as a whole? So take a look at those business needs. Then take a look at your user needs. And that can simply be done by going and sitting with them for a little while. It's funny when people take a fresh look and you just observe what they're doing, a lot of times people find that they would prefer to use function keys. And you as an admin have the ability to enable that and provide them a list now of function keys that they can use to make their life a little bit easier so they don't have to keep jumping between the mouse. Actually, that would make the mouse obsolete. And a lot of people are used to using the keyboard for that kind of functionality. So what would best be used for your end users? Take a look at all the data and things that they're entering on a constant basis and look for those ways that you can improve their experience or minimize the number of keystrokes they have to do to either retrieve a document, import a document, or jumping to potentially a different screen like workflow or scanning. And then last but not least, don't forget about yourself. What are your needs as an administrator? What things can you change to ease your burden and or will make your life easier so that your end users are bugging you less and that the product is being used most effectively within the organization? So those are the things that I would take a look at whenever you want to make any of these changes. And the best way to do that, of course, is spend time with your users and management to determine what are the best changes to implement within your organization. And of course, if this is just a small listing of the features and functionality that can ease the burdens within an organization, if there are features that you have not seen today or do not exist, please let us know. You all know how to get a hold of us, so email support and we'll be happy to get those enhancement requests in there, because if you want it, potentially other people want it too. And that's how OnBase can be improved, is to continually submit your ideas. And obviously, if it can make your life easier, either as an admin or an end user, we want to hear about those. Now, where else can you learn more about these types of things? You can go out to, of course, our Naviant Cafe, the best place for information, our blog, look at WordPress.com, and Highland community. They are enhancing the search capabilities and the information that are out there. I've seen some of you have submitted questions out there, which is great. It's a fantastic method to look up information. So I encourage everybody to go out there, along with training.onbase.com as well. Are there any questions? We have just a couple of minutes before we have to turn you back loose to doing your daily duties, but we'd love to answer any questions you'd have. So the door is open. There is one question out there regarding large files. Yes, the large files tab option, the checkbox, that compression, the way it handles large documents, can help expedite the process for bringing in those images and displaying those images. It's definitely something you want to turn on. So check the box, go out to your client, and bring up some of your largest images and do some timing with it enabled and without, and also look at the image quality. Because it does do through compression, some of the image quality does degrade. Now, it may not be in every document's instance, it may not be an issue because it doesn't do it a ton, but for really fine images where you need to see great detail, it may be too much. So, but that checkbox is very invaluable for large files and hopefully expediting the return of those images from the file server. And yes, the PowerPoint from today will be available. So once we get done with the entire presentation, it'll be available online. And we will email everybody the link to that once the presentation is done. Great questions. So let's cover the current versions. Obviously, we've talked a lot about OnBase 12. So if you're not there yet, OnBase 12 SP1 is out. If you're planning ahead, because you don't want to do an upgrade this spring, this summer, and I'm going to say summer vaguely because Highland has not announced yet when 13 will be coming out, but they said sometime in the summer. So if you're planning a fall upgrade, that will be OnBase 13 most likely. For those of you using Colfax Capture, that is version 10. If you're not there, you should get there. And those of you using VRS, Colfax VRS Elite version 5 is still the current version. And last but not least, Teleforms has released version 7 of Teleforms. Thank you again for everybody for attending. If you have any questions based on all this great content, I know we covered a lot in a short period of time, you can obviously contact us at support, 800-686-8789 for those you like to call, or email us support@naviant.com. We have the chat window available from our website. We also have just a form on the website you can submit for any of those questions that comes right into our support box, and we'll get back to you that way as well. Our next webinar in March, just around the corner, hopefully a little more springtime, we will be covering the RICO tablet. Some of you have seen that who attended our educational conference up in the Wisconsin Dells. We're going to show some of the features and functionality and enhancements to that and how you can leverage it within your organization. And of course, we would love to see you at our next educational conference back in Wisconsin Dells, October 14th and 15th. So mark your calendars now because we'd love to see you in October. Thank you everyone for attending. We hope you have a fantastic day. We appreciate you spending an hour with us learning new things about OnBase and expanding your systems.